everybody, to Integrate Yourself. I'm your host, Allison Pillow, and you can find me at finalythrivingbook.com and pureenergypdx.com. Today, I'm here with a very special guest, Ben Azadi. In 2008, Ben went through a personal health transformation of shedding 80 pounds of pure fat. Ever since, Ben has become a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and has been on a mission to help 1 billion people live a healthier lifestyle. Ben is also the author of 4 best-selling books: Keto Flex, the Perfect Health Booklet, the Intermittent Fasting Cheat Sheet, and the Power of Sleep. Ben has been the go-to source for intermittent fasting and the ketogenic diet. He is known as the health detective because he investigates dysfunction and he educates, not medicates, to bring the body back to normal function. Ben is the founder of Keto Kamp, a global brand bringing awareness to ancient healing strategies such as the keto diet and fasting. And Ben is also the host of a top 15 podcast, the Keto Kamp podcast, and the fast-growing Keto Kamp YouTube channel with over 130,000 subscribers, and a TikTok channel with over 200,000 subscribers and over 30 million video downloads. Wow, that's amazing. Thanks so much, Ben, for coming on the show. I'm so happy you're here.
I'm so happy to be here. We had a great time last week on my podcast. Now I'm on your awesome podcast. So thanks for having me, Allison.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's such an honor and a pleasure. You've built such a wonderful platform on what you experienced in your own life, the transformation you personally experienced. And that's very inspiring. And that's probably why so many people follow what you're doing and what you're teaching, because they see how you did that within your own life. And so great job with that. That's amazing to be able to lose that much weight and to continue to create a lifestyle that really supports and maintains your health in the way you have. So amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. Back then when I was going through the challenges, I was like, why is this happening to me? Why is, and that pain now turned into a purpose. So it's amazing to kind of see that evolve over the years. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Would you like to share more about your story and how you got to be in this place? I'd love to hear more about the backstory of all that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was born in America and I ate a standard American diet, as you know, very toxic, processed. The acronym is SAD. It's very appropriate for that diet. So I was, average American, eating an average American diet. And I found myself growing up bullied, picked on. I was obese, physically obese, mentally obese, really low self-confidence, depression, just a bad upbringing, hung out with the wrong crowd, did drugs, sold drugs, addictions to video games and drugs and alcohol. And I was pretty much left to my own devices. My parents were divorced and my mom, she raised me and my sister and worked 3 jobs. So she was never home. So I pretty much did whatever I wanted to do. And what I did was pretty bad. I was a bad kid. And I found myself as an adult now, this all transferred, all my bad behaviors transferred into my adulthood, where I found myself when I was 24 years old, back in 2008, physically broken, mentally broken, actually looking for ways to give up on life, exploring suicide because I was just tired of crying every day and just hurting and victim mindset. And every time I explored suicide, I kept thinking about my mom and, what she would have to deal with if I took my life. And it stopped me every time. And it was a vicious cycle of exploring suicide, thinking about my mom, stopping myself, back and forth, back and forth. At this point in my life, I was working at a job that was very uninspiring. I was a packing and shipping manager at a 9-to-5 job. I was 24 years old. I weighed 250 pounds. And I needed to make a change. I needed to shift things because I was not living a life on purpose with my purpose. And I was very much unhealthy. And that's the point where everything changed for me. I was given a book and one of my best friends gave me a book and said, I think this book could help you out with what you're dealing with. So I read the book, and then one book led to 5 books, which led to 20 books. And I just became obsessed with reading incredible authors like Dr. Wayne Dyer and Bob Proctor and Earl Nightingale and all these incredible authors who opened up a whole new world to me that I never was aware that it existed. And the books did so much for me, but the number one thing that the books did for me to this day, it helped me take ownership and responsibility for the first time in my life. Up until that point, Allison, I was blaming everyone, right? Of course I'm obese. My mom brings home Kentucky Fried Chicken every day because she works at Kentucky Fried Chicken. So she's like enabling this behavior. And of course I'm obese. My dad's overweight and has diabetes. It's in my genetics. So I was playing the victim card. But when you take ownership and responsibility, when I took ownership and responsibility, that goes out the window. You stop being the victim of your history and you start becoming the victor of your destiny. And that's exactly what happened with me. And that word is so important these days, responsibility. That is our ability to respond to life. My ability to respond to life was poor. And as a result, I was getting poor results. Then I became better at my ability to respond to life by taking ownership, and everything improved. So 9 months after that, I went from 250 pounds down to 170 pounds. I went from 34% body fat to 6% body fat. I went from size 38 waist to size 30. And finally, I carved out this physical six pack. That was just like a pipe dream to me, right? Not that that is synonymous with health, but for me, it was a goal. But the most important thing that I achieved to this day was a mental six pack. I started to understand a lot of the work that you teach, Allison, how important the mindset is. And most of your results come from those thoughts, comes from your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, and actions. So that's what got me started in the health space. That was about 14 years ago. And I've been exploring different approaches and avenues and experimenting with things. I was a personal trainer for almost 10 years. And I opened up a CrossFit gym, sold a CrossFit gym. So I've been exploring different avenues. And now I do everything virtual. And I have my books and podcasts, as you mentioned on the intro.
Wow, that's incredible. What an interesting road, that you've been on, an interesting journey. And I love how you bring up responsibility, moving from victimhood to being responsible for your life. Because responsibility, although sometimes it sounds boring, it can actually be really liberating, because what you're doing is now you're taking ownership of everything you're creating in your life. So it sounds like that's what you did. And look at you now. That's amazing. That's just
Thank you, Allison.
incredible. Yeah.
You're right. Because when you take I literally said those words, I am responsible. And I felt liberated. To your point, it's almost impossible to feel angry and resentful and like a victim and take responsibility at the same time. So it changed everything for me.
That's great. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So if you don't mind me asking, what was the book that your friend gave you that changed everything for you?
It wasn't so much that was the book. It was that was the book that started for me to read books. But the book
Gotcha.
was The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And it was a great book because it helped me understand the compound effect of your daily behaviors, your daily thoughts, and how that accumulates and compounds over time. If you can make small little tweaks, that could lead to giant peaks in your life. So that book opened the door for me to get really familiar, or not familiar, but me to get interested in reading about books. And thank God for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great, because that is how it happens. These small steps create something so much bigger in our lives, but we think it has to be this big thing or this big profound moment in our life, which it never really happens that way, right?
So true.
So, well, that's so cool. I would love to get into, you talk a lot about, well, first of all, you've written 4 books, which is an incredible feat within itself. And they're also best selling, and so you talk about how to tap into the innate intelligence with ancient healing strategies. And my guess is this relates to fasting. I would love to hear more about that and how you help your clients with that and your readers with that. I would love to hear about also the ancient, like where this came from, because I don't know a lot of history about fasting. I know a lot about the healing properties of fasting, but I was not aware we've been using it as long as we have. It
Yeah,
seems like a new
absolutely.
thing to many people, right?
You're so right. People
Yeah.
think fasting is new or keto is new, but to your point, it's really been around for as long as humans have existed. And so, yeah, the innate intelligence, we'll start there because I just love sharing about the innate intelligence. To me, the innate intelligence is in every single human cell. And we have about 50 to 70 trillion cells inside of the human body. And there is an innate intelligence. And this innate intelligence is like an inner physician, inner doctor, and it's the world's greatest doctor. There's no pill, surgery, supplement, shot, whatever that could replace the healing capabilities of this innate intelligence that's put inside of our cells that help the body heal. And for many years, Allison, a lot of scientists thought that the intelligence of the cells, the innate intelligence, was the DNA nucleus. And that means, the premise behind that means whatever genes you got, you're pretty much screwed. If you have cancer that runs in your family or diabetes like me, just a matter of time, because that's your genetics. And there's some truth to that, meaning you cannot change the genes that you were born with, but there is that epigenetic part that a lot of people either don't understand or they ignore. And that's more powerful than the actual genetic part. So this goes to I'm tying this to fasting, by the way. This goes to the innate intelligence. So Dr. Bruce Lipton, who's an amazing world-renowned cell biologist. He wrote a great book, The Biology of Belief. I interviewed him a couple of years ago on my podcast. Amazing interview. He wanted to challenge that premise that your intelligence is in your DNA. So what he did, and which has been duplicated by many scientists since, he removed the DNA nucleus from cells and then observed what would happen. And if the intelligence was actually in the DNA nucleus, the cell should die right away. But that didn't happen. The cells ended up living for 2 months, sometimes even longer, before the cell went rogue and ended up going into apoptosis, which is cell death. So that showed that it's not the DNA nucleus where the intelligence is, it's somewhere else. So he wanted to find out, okay, where is it? So then he removed the membrane of a cell, and then boom, instant death. So to me, that goes to show that the cell membrane, which is this lipid bilayer around every cell, that's where the intelligence is. And if we could have lifestyle behaviors that actually work on reducing inflammation at that membrane level, that's when we put our body in a healing state. So fasting is one of the best ways to tap into this innate intelligence and harness the innate intelligence, because the opposite of fasting is, of course, eating. And the average American is eating throughout the entire day, and they're eating highly processed carbs, and it's getting out of control. There was actually a study that came out in 2018. It was a 10-year study from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, over 8,000 people in the study. Their goal was to determine how healthy or how unhealthy is the adult American population. They looked at different metrics: blood pressure, BMI, A1C, insulin, on medication, off medication. And the results showed that only 12% of American adults are metabolically healthy, meaning 88% of American adults are metabolically unhealthy. And that was before COVID. That probably got worse in the last few years. And what's the problem? Well, people are eating a whole bunch of carbs, and they're eating it throughout the entire day. Our cells are not built to be in this fed state, which challenges your body. It challenges your digestive system. It increases your insulin production. It leads to insulin resistance. So fasting is a great way to reset the gut, reset the body, because it takes a lot of energy, a lot of blood flow to digest a meal. And there was a study that also came out in the University of Virginia that showed 800 calories takes about 14 hours to 16 hours to get digested. So if somebody's eating every 2 to 3 hours, and they're not going more than 12 or 14 hours in a fasted state, it's just too much for the body and the digestive system to deal with, which leads to a lot of problems. So fasting is a way to reset that and let your innate intelligence go to work. And there's so many benefits to it. And that's one of the reasons why I love fasting.
Yeah, it can definitely be a great reset for people, and that's, I think, why the detoxes became really popular. And my guess would be the ancient aspect of it is maybe used in some of the traditions of yoga and throughout the years, and even further back, right? For enlightenment and those kinds of things, right? Because the lighter your body is, the more that you're going to be able to transcend into these lighter bodies. So so I think that a lot can be, because it seems like as a society, like you're saying, like so many people were in one extreme or the other, right? And most people are overeating. They're probably sitting around most of the day, so they're not really metabolizing the carbs, not eating the right carbs. And then, all this energy that goes in is not being used. So it just gets stored as fat. And so that's what's happening. And And so, doing something like that's probably why intermittent fasting has become so popular in keto as well, because it's a way for people to just kind of clear the slate, instead of thinking too much about it, and then kind of reset their apostat, gauge there as well, because much of that has been changed too for people with all the crazy chemicals in our food, and things we're being marketed to. I don't watch commercials, but my my husband and son, they love basketball, and so our two sons, but my other son has moved out since. But yeah, they watch basketball games, and that's the only time we watch commercials. And some of the commercials that come on, I'm like, oh my God, the food is terrible that they're marketing. And this is a sporting event. Like, these are athletes we're watching here, but yet we're looking at the worst food you could put in your body.
I know. And they make it normal. Like, that's what athletes use to fuel their body. It's crazy.
It is crazy. Yeah, it's how we associate. It's such a terrible association. Mm-hmm. So, what we're seeing for the most part is like really not what is good for us. So, what do you feel like your approach, and kind of like, I would love to hear more about your approach and what you teach your clients as it relates to mindset as well, because as we discussed earlier, mindset is a big part of it. So really starting to realign your mindset around what your beliefs are about food, what your beliefs are about your body, and these kinds of things. Like for you, you read these books and it really opened up your potential that you didn't know was even there. So how important is this in when people are really trying to get healthy?
It's the key to success in health and everything. It's what you teach is so important, Allison, because it's the inner work that a lot of people unfortunately pass over to just, okay, what are the macros for keto are the questions I get. How do I lose weight on keto? What's the best intermittent fasting schedule? And those are, valid questions, but I think more importantly is, how do we do the inner work? How do we change our subconscious mind? How do we change this paradigm? How do we live a life on purpose with our purpose? So I think it's the key to health and healing the body. And it was for me, and it has been for so many people that I've taught this to. So for me, it all starts with gratitude. I call it vitamin G. I believe it's the strongest vitamin in the world. As a matter of fact, Dr. Joe Dispenza has done some tests where he's done brain scans on some of his participants in his conference. He's given them vitamin G, meaning they practice gratitude, and he observed what happened in their body. And he noticed 1,200 different chemical reactions happen instantaneously that put the body in a healing, anti-inflammatory state from gratitude, right?
Yeah,
and
that's amazing.
Free. Isn't that amazing? And it's free. So vitamin G is something that I sprinkle in throughout my entire day. It's something I recommend for my students to develop a gratitude practice. Thinking about gratitude is great. It's a great start, but there's a power to actually writing it down, and even more powerful when you express it to somebody. Something that we just did in my Keto Kamp Academy, we did a 12-day challenge. The challenge was this: find one person that you appreciate, meaning somebody, a colleague, a friend, a coworker, and express gratitude to them. Either call them, leave a voicemail, a voice message, a text, an email, and find at least one person and do that for 12 days straight. And it was incredible to just see people feel happier. And not only that, their relationship strengthened with that person. And who knows what those individuals might be going through their day to day. They might be having a crappy day and they see their phone, they get a text, and it could change things for that person. So gratitude is essential, because when you start to appreciate things, what you appreciate appreciates. It's a universal law. You teach this, Allison. It's what you feed energy to expands. And a lot of people are feeding energy to all the things that are not working for them, the opposite of gratitude. Why am I so ugly? Why do I have this going on? Why am I overweight? Why do I hate my job? And the more you focus on what you don't want to work for you or what's not working for you, the more you get of what's not going to work for you. But when you change that around, you start to focus on gratitude, all of a sudden things shift. It doesn't happen overnight, but the more consistent you are with that, it's incredible what it does, because it starts to reprogram that subconscious mind. And now all of the behaviors that are just embedded into that paradigm, the subconscious mind, start to shift. And then there's also a part of the brain called the reticular activation system, which is the selective seeking mechanism. Whatever you feed it, you see, right? If you want to buy a red car and you've been searching on Auto Trader or online for a month looking for a red Mustang, you buy the red Mustang, all of a sudden you see red Mustangs everywhere. You've activated the reticular activation system. So if you've been focusing on the negativity, the stinking thinking, RAS, our reticular activation system, shows you all the things that are not working. But when you shift that and appreciate things, now you see things in appreciation, and that appreciates. So what you think about and what you think about, you bring about. So for me, it starts with gratitude, Allison.
That's so beautiful. Yeah. And it's really just, it comes down to a perspective change on your part, right? Because like, what do you want to see more of in your life? And that's your decision to make. That's the responsibility aspect that we were talking about earlier, owning your experience and not just being pulled in all these different directions, right?
Yeah.
When you were saying that about the gratitude as well, what I was thinking about also, what came to mind was have you ever read Dr. Emoto's book? The Hidden Messages in Water is what I think the book is called.
No.
I think you would love that book, because what he did is he studied water crystals, and he would do these experiments where he would bless them, and say the words like gratitude and love and all these things, and then they would change. He would freeze them, and then they would change. The crystals would change into something very symmetrical and beautiful, and then he would use negativity toward the water crystal and direct it to it, and then it would get really distorted and asymmetric and everything, and it wouldn't look right, really kind of like diseased.
Wow.
So think about our bodies and how much water that our bodies contain. And so what I think is that the water in our body is what takes in consciousness. It can change depending on what we're focusing on, what we're hearing, what other people are directing towards us. So a great experiment would just be, and you've seen probably people do this in yoga studios. They'll put these stickers on their water bottles, like love and gratitude. But the reason for that is to create, the consciousness within the water of love. And so you can do that with your own body too, not just your water bottle, but it's a great experiment as well. And so I tell my clients, just take a sip of the water before you do the blessing, and then do it, and then take a sip after. Does it taste different? Just start to try that. And you can also do that with your food too. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that, Allison. That is such a great tip right there. I'm going to read the book, by the way.
Oh, I think it's a very quick read, but it is just amazing the work he did. And he has pictures of the water crystals, and it's just, when you see that, you're like, oh, okay, now that makes sense. How
I got goosebumps because the body, like you said, is mostly water. And if he's proving that with that, oh my gosh, that's really cool.
Very cool, right? So, and oh my God. So vitamin G, I love that. It's so important for us all to include in our lives because of that very reason. And so you touched on this a little bit, Ben, but how do you get people out of that negative feedback loop? Because so many people are in that, where we've been taught that from generation to generation, that, negativity is kind of our first go-to, and that, making ourselves small is the thing to do. You don't want to really stand out. You want to try to fit in, and those kinds of things. How do you help people? What's your approach with that, with your clients and with yourself?
Yeah. And all of that's the paradigm, right? And you shared that on the interview I did with you. It's these behaviors that you learned growing up, and it downloads into your hardware, and all of a sudden it's just running on autopilot. It's called the paradigm. So we need to change the paradigm. There's two ways to change the paradigm. Only two ways that I know of. Number one, an emotional impact is a powerful way to change the paradigm. Now, 9 times out of 10, an emotional impact is something negative. For example, like 9/11 here in the United States, that was an emotional impact for a lot of people who were involved with that. And it changed people's paradigm. It changed the way they think. When I lost my dad in 2014 from the complications of diabetes, changed my paradigm, changed the way that I thought. So ideally, we don't really want to go down the suffering route of changing the paradigm. So I like the second option, which is consistent spaced repetition. That is the best way, in my opinion, to change the paradigm. So it doesn't happen overnight, but the more consistent, it goes back to what we shared earlier, the small little tweaks you're making this week one tweak a week, one tweak a week. You start to stack that momentum. So when we think about what controls the paradigms, it's the thoughts that we have every single day. And there was a study done by several psychiatrists to determine how many thoughts does the average person have every single day. And they came to the conclusion that the average person has upwards of 60,000 thoughts per day. Then they also did another study. Okay, out of those 60,000 thoughts per day, what percentage of them are the same thoughts from yesterday? And they determined that about 90% of the thoughts are the same thoughts from yesterday. And out of those thoughts, 85% of them are negative, the stinking thinking. And I got that from Zig Ziglar, the stinking thinking. And I always say, if your thinking is stinking, your dreams are shrinking. So if we understand your thoughts create your reality, because it really does. So I like to, sometimes I'll share this and you might relate and people start to think, oh, Allison, or Ben, you're getting a little woo-woo. This is a little, where's the science to back this up? And then I'll bring in Dr. Bruce Lipton, because he has proven that your thoughts are a frequency that have the ability to penetrate your cell membrane and communicate with your DNA nucleus. And if it's a negative thought, a hateful thought, a fearful thought, the DNA produces inflammatory proteins from those thoughts. And if it's a loving thought, a grateful thought, an abundant thought, the DNA produces anti-inflammatory proteins and stem cells. Thoughts actually could create stem cells, which is amazing. So we want to just get better and become more aware of the thoughts that we're having. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's the times where you're brushing your teeth, you're walking your dog, you're washing dishes. Like, what are those thoughts that are coming into your mind? And your greatest power that you have as a human being, animals don't have this, is your ability to change your thoughts. When you have a negative thought, understand it's just your old conditioning, it's your paradigm, and then choose a better thought. And the better you get at that, now you start to respond, right? You talk about that, respond versus react. And I remember Viktor Frankl, the Jewish psychiatrist who wrote the book, I think Man's Search for Meaning. He says, with every action, there's a space between your response. And in that space determines pretty much your future. It's like you have that space, and it can be just a millisecond, but if you become aware of it, things start to shift. So I recommend really becoming aware of those thoughts, and your environment control those thoughts. So that should be the prerequisite. It's like, are you watching the television all day long with the commercials? Are you watching the news, which is super negative? Are you on social media? Are your friends toxic? Your environment control those thoughts. So you change your environment, you start working on your thoughts, you practice gratitude, and it's just a matter of time that you start to just take off with all areas of your life.
That is amazing. Yeah, I love that you bring that up. And it's so funny as you say that. Yeah, in your environment, I tell people all the time, since I guess with it's transpired more so the past couple of years, it's always been around, that news has become bad for your health. TV has become, one of those junk food like categories there. That's like, really, it's becoming, because, and this is really interesting. I was going to share that I just had an interview with a friend of mine. Her name is Rue, and she's originally from Ukraine, and she's been doing a lot of, she has a background in DNA research, and she was talking about, actually the show gets released this week, and she was talking about how DNA is not actually as much physical as it is energetic. So, and I was like, oh, that flipped a switch within me, because I was like, I've always thought about DNA as being something very physical, but actually it's energetic. So if you think about it like that, it can change so easily that way. And so we think about all the years of ancestral passing down of thoughts, of beliefs, of stories that we've gone by. And this is why our DNA hasn't changed very much. But now things are opening up where we can create new stories, and we can create a new way of being as well, like you say, and really explore that. And so just think about the potential there now with our DNA. We don't have to, go by these old stories of that. And when she said that, I was like, oh my God, of course. What do you think
Powerful.
about that?
No, I agree with that. Absolutely. And it's a beautiful thought, because it puts people in the driver's seat. It's the old premise is out the window that your genetics is your destiny. It's not the case. We have so much control over our future, our present moment, our health. our environment, especially if you live in America. I mean, you have the freedom to
Yeah.
do the things that you want to do. And it's such a blessing. So I love that DNA is more energetic than physical. Absolutely. It's a brilliant way to put it.
Yeah. And just think about all the stories that get passed down to patients from doctors. Nothing against doctors, but it's your genetics, and I hear people say that all the time. It's in my genetics. And I'm like, is it though? Is
Yeah.
it really? Do you really know that? Because I feel like that's also a story. And so, yeah, it's just, it's just kind of just going outside of the box and thinking a little bit more about, hey, is that really true? And could there be something else about this that I don't know yet,
I love it.
Yeah.
Questioning, asking questions. You're right. Most people, when I post on social media and I talk about certain topics, a lot of people play that victim game. I've got this because it's my genes, it's my genetics. It's, my family got it. My mom had it, so I have it. And it's not a premise that I like to live, because it's a very disempowering premise that, it's just bad luck. And I don't believe in luck. I believe in law, right? So
Yeah.
we have control, and conversations like this, your work, my work, very important to give people hope and empower them and understand that your DNA is not your destiny. It's you that controls your DNA, and epigenetics is the name of the game here.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. So I wanted to also talk about the topic of is it autophagy?
Oh,
Autophagy?
autophagy. Yeah.
Autophagy. Thank you. I was
Yeah.
like, wait a minute. I said that word much better earlier. Now I
You said it
forgot.
right earlier. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was like, wait a minute. My mind is somewhere else, obviously. So I was thinking about, so I just watched it's called Awake. It's, if you've ever read the book Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda's story. Have you ever read that before?
No.
Great. Also another great book. And he was one of the people who brought yoga to the United States, first on the West Coast. And he has there's a self-realization center in Encinitas that was built for him. And he has an amazing story. And so the reason I bring him up is because he taught yoga, but he really taught it more from a place of harnessing your mind, and really learning how to navigate that part of it. It wasn't as much about how we really know yoga today, as much about poses and getting in shape. It was much more about the kind of just harnessing the energy of the mind and knowing how to do that, and knowing how to, get into your third eye and explore that way. But he talked about that kind of practice of like really detoxifying the cells, cleansing them as much as possible in order to get to these higher states of reality. I would love for you to just expand on your experience with that and just kind of explain to my audience what that is as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
love that approach to yoga. It's beautiful. Autophagy, the Greek definition for autophagy means eat thyself. So it's a process that the innate intelligence regulates, that turns on these mechanisms to look for damaged cellular function, debris, proteins, mitochondria in your cells, and to start fixing it and cleaning them up. So the analogy that I always share about autophagy that really helps people understand how it works is this. Let's say we have our refrigerator. So we open up the refrigerator, picture a refrigerator opening up right now, and you see all of these groceries that all have expiration dates on them. Now, what would happen if we let all of the groceries inside of the fridge expire? We don't use them. They're just sitting there. They all end up expiring, but we don't throw them away. We just leave them back in the fridge. It's going to be a nasty environment. There's going to be disease that will manifest in that refrigerator. Well, the human body is like that refrigerator. We have cells, we have proteins and fats and bacteria that all have expiration dates on them. They need to go through this recycling, cleansing process in order to regenerate stronger and better than before. And that process is called autophagy. Your body is so smart, it activates autophagy to look for those expired groceries, if you will, and start recycling them. And it goes a step further. When the innate intelligence starts to look for damaged cells and it starts to work on it, and the innate intelligence determines, oh, this cell is not functioning at all. We can't even fix it. It is what's called a senescent cell. Some call it a zombie cell. Then the innate intelligence sends a signal to get rid of that cell via apoptosis, programmed cell death. And then it goes a step further. When it gets rid of a cell, then a new signal is sent for a stem cell. And it's a new baby cell. That stem cell could be used for your liver, your eyeball, your brain. I mean, it's directed wherever the body needs to put it. And all this is happening via autophagy. And there's a couple of ways, there's actually a few ways to activate autophagy. Exercise is actually a very powerful way, and it's right up your alley to activate autophagy. Strength training. When you're sore, you're actually getting autophagy. You're tearing down muscle, building it back up. Very similar to this process. Fasting is another powerful way. It's my favorite way to activate autophagy. And then there's also something called like senolytics, which are found in specific ingredients like turmeric and mushroom extract and green tea and these polyphenol rich foods. So we want a balance of getting this autophagy. But here's the thing. Too much of a good thing is not better. Okay. Like fasting is great. Excessive fasting, not good. Keto is great. Being in ketosis all the time, not good. So with autophagy, which is more catabolic in a good way, we need to balance that out with more of the anabolic pathway, which is mTOR. So, we have to find that balance, but autophagy is that process, such a great process in the body.
I love that you bring that up because so many people are like more. And I think that they've just gone off the rails with some of these keto and intermittent fasting approaches. And
I've been there myself.
Yeah, we all have done extremes, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to diets, and I've been there too. Now I do really good carbs. I do a mix, of like really clean food, but I know certain carbs work really well for me. I do, that's what I do. But I'm curious about this fasting thing because I would love to hear more about how you use it yourself and how you recommend people would use something like that. Like, what are the right times in people's lives, and who's the right person for this, and what's the wrong time for someone to do it? Those kinds of things.
Absolutely. So I'll start with who probably shouldn't fast. If you're underweight, malnourished, probably shouldn't do much fasting because you need to be more in a growth phase. Under the age of 18, you're still growing, probably shouldn't fast. If you're very fragile and elderly, like over 65, 70, probably shouldn't fast too much. Of course, pregnant, breastfeeding, probably shouldn't fast. Now, everybody else could benefit from the right approach. It's going to be very unique to the person and very individualized. But what I always tell people is just make sure you have your eating window and you have your fasting window. So feast, famine, cycling. And that could, a general protocol that works for a lot of people is a 16-8. So out of a 24-hour period for 16 hours, you're in that fasted state. You're having water, electrolytes, coffee, tea, but you're not really eating a big meal. That's for 16 hours. And then you have an 8-hour eating window where you have your meals, your 2 to 3 meals, and you're not cutting calories. It's not about calories, it's just about having a window of fasting, a window of feasting, healthy food. So that would look like 11 a.m. to 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. eating window. And then outside of that, fasting window. But that could change, whatever is better for your schedule. So that's one approach. Now, for me, I get very creative with my fast. Like I've done a 5-day water fast before to really like maximize this autophagy. You get this maximum autophagy effect, which is really great at preventing diseases. As a matter of fact, there's a doctor named Dr. Thomas Seyfried from Boston College. He wrote the book, Cancer as a Metabolic Disease. And in his book, he said, if you completed a 7-day water-only fast once a year, you would reduce your risk of cancer by 95%.
Once a year? Wow.
Yeah, once a year from this maximum autophagy process. I'm able to achieve maximum autophagy in 5 days because I'm more metabolically flexible. So I did that. And then I do a 24-hour fast from time to time. There's also some research. It's a great way to reset the gut. But I make sure that I'm always balancing my fasting schedule with my feasting schedule. Like we want to make sure we're eating healthy, eating until full, and getting enough nutrition and protein during your window. And then you balance it out with fasting. So I love that approach of feast, famine, cycling, but it's going to be very different based off of the person. If somebody is very overweight, they could get more aggressive with their fasting schedule because they have been in a fed state. They have a lot of stored energy. They could do more fasting. If a woman has a menstrual cycle, the week before her period is the week that you don't want to fast. You don't want to do keto. You want to build progesterone. And I talk about that in chapter 12 of my book. So there's so many nuances here, but I would say in general, a 16-8 will work well for most people.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Cause that would be my next question. Cause women would have a different, approach. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Women should definitely do fasting and keto differently than men. And then it also depends on if you're postmenopausal or a menstruating woman, right? The menstruating women, you have this 28-day cycle of different hormones fluctuating, and men have a 24-hour cycle. So my colleague, Dr. Stephanie Estima, I like her comparison. She said men are like the sun with their hormones, 24-hour cycle. Women who have a menstrual cycle are like the moon, 28-day cycle. So we want to go with our physiology. So the worst week to fast and do keto is the 7 days leading up to that monthly cycle, because that's the week you want to build progesterone and estrogen. And you don't do that with fasting and keto. You do it with healthy carbs and eating.
That's why I do carbs. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Smart.
Yes. Well, God, thank you so much. This is amazing. Are there any other topics you want to bring up while we're here? Because I feel like we've covered so much already in such a short time.
Yeah, we did cover a lot. These are great, great questions. It's just what I would like to share is the human body is just so amazing. In my book, I talk about 3 simple steps. If you follow these 3 simple steps, on paper, they're simple, but when you put them into action, not as simple. But these steps will get you the results you want with your health and longevity. So the steps are very easy. Number 1, identify the interference. What is preventing this innate intelligence from doing its job? It's excessive inflammation. What is causing that? So that's number 1. Number 2, you work on removing the interference, right? So maybe you change your nutrition, you change your thoughts, you change your environment. So many things you can do. And number 3, you just allow your amazing, incredible human body to heal. And it's capable of healing. I've seen it do amazing things with so many students who are type 2 diabetic for 12 years and in months reverse their type 2 diabetes, get off their insulin, get off their blood sugar medication, working with their doctor, of course. People getting off of medications for years in a matter of weeks to months. It's the innate intelligence. I always say, you are a masterpiece because you are a piece of the master. You were built so magnificently. And I really want to give people hope because the mainstream approach is the exact opposite. They're chasing symptoms, and symptoms should not be chased. Symptoms are actually an amazing gift from your innate intelligence to show you that there's interference, but you don't just chase the symptom. For example, when I was obese and overweight, I never had a weight problem. Nobody in the history of this world has a weight problem. It is a weight symptom. You get healthy to lose the weight. You don't lose weight to get healthy. That's completely opposite of what most dietitians and personal trainers and doctors are going to tell you to do, because it's the symptom that goes away by default. Cancer is a symptom. Diabetes is a symptom. Those are actually not the problem. They are a result of the problem. They could be far removed. It could take 10 to 20 years before a cancer diagnosis, but 10 years ago, that cancer was growing from your lifestyle behavior. So when you start to make shifts right now, over time, that yields you more time on planet Earth, more happiness, more health, more vitality. And I just want people to have that hope and understanding that their body is just so miraculous.
Yeah, that's such great wisdom, because especially what we've experienced this past couple of years was a huge distrust of the body on a collective level, right?
Exactly.
And it's like getting back to our body's innate intelligence, like you say, and how everything works together. It's a holistic unit, and it's not these separate pieces that we've been thought to believe work. It's like it's all about your metabolism, and that translates to your immune system. That translates to like you said, cancer, all of these things. Your metabolism everything is really dependent on that functioning properly and healthily. So, and it's just such a magical thing that people don't realize. They just kind of equate the metabolism as to what we need to focus on when we're trying to lose weight. But actually, the metabolism is it's everything for your body. It's like, it's kind of a representation of your life force energy in a way, on a physical level and how it works. So, yeah, there's so much that people don't know, but I'm so glad that you're teaching more people about this innate wisdom within their body, and learning how to listen to it, and, really communicate with it as well. That's beautiful.
Thank you, Allison. It's always a pleasure to
Yeah.
share this, and I'm grateful to be on your awesome platform as well.
I'm grateful you're here too, Ben. I'm grateful we got connected. Please share with my audience any way that they can get into your keto camp or anything you're offering that you want to talk about as we close up here.
Yeah, thank you. I would say to go listen to my podcast if you're interested. Keto Kamp podcast. You could start with Allison's episode. That'll be out by the time this episode comes out. It was an amazing conversation, so you could listen to that. And then my website is benazadi.com. It has my podcast, my programs, my books, etc. Could all be found that one place. So benazadi.com. And I'd love to hear from you. If you're on Instagram or social media, I'd love to, if you want to reach out and message me, I'm very approachable and accessible, and I'd love to connect with you. So any avenue you're on, I'm there, and I'd love to connect with your audience.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's what I love about your show and the information that you put out, Ben, is like it's for everybody. It's not just for like keto enthusiasts or people that are really just kind of pinpointing that one thing. It's like it's broad, it's like you can kind of take from it what you need, and you give such a really great perspective on health. So thank you for putting that out there.
I received that very well because that is a goal of mine. So thank you for that acknowledgement.
You're so welcome. Yeah, thank you so much. Did you give a website, by the way?
Yeah,
You said
benazadi.com.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
great. I'll put that in the show notes too. Thanks again, Ben. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Allison.